Welcome to Real Talk with Real Estate Pros, where we bring you exclusive interviews with the real estate experts. We'll delve deep into their journey to success and learn how to go the extra mile to serve their clients' wants and needs. Let's dive in. Here's your host, John Money McKinley.
Good morning, everyone. John Money McKinley here on another edition of Real Talk with Real Estate Pros. We got a great show lined up for you guys today. I have a special guest. His name is Greg West, and he is an expert in the wonderful world of credit. And I'm sure a lot of us have noticed lately with all the wonderful economy that we're in, credit seems to be on the top of mind of everybody. But before we dive into this, because we are going to be diving deep into credit and finances on the show today, and please remember, this is a live show. If you'd like to, please go ahead and join into the chat, make some comments, ask some questions. We'd love to answer your questions, and please like and subscribe to my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. But we definitely want to get some disclosures out. This show is simply done for information purposes only and as entertainment. Nobody here is offering any solutions or problem-solving advice for any health, science, or credit issues you may have. This is all for entertainment purposes only. Should you have any questions on your finances or financing, please consult an expert for that. With that said, Mr. West, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being on the air. And I know that you have been in the wonderful world of helping people with their credit for over 20 years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, close to 30, probably. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Since the early 90s.
Yeah, I know. Just for full disclosure here, it was in the 90s, early 90s, actually, when I first met Mr. West. And that's how we started communicating together, because I've been involved in the wonderful world of real estate and finance since the 90s. And Greg was a credit expert I knew back then, and he's still doing this, which with all the changes we've been through, there's been lots of credit guys come and go. And Greg is still here with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, Greg, and give us a little bit of background on what you have going on and what you've been able to do, and tell us a little bit about your business, please.
Sure. And to reiterate what John said, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not considered financial advice, just a guy that's got a lot of experience in it. So do your own research and look at this as entertainment purposes. But yeah, I actually got into the credit business because I actually needed credit help way back in the early 90s. I had suffered through a business loss. I ended up having to file bankruptcy. Came across a guy that was doing it, and long story short, I started working for him. And then we just agreed to disagree on some things, went out on my own, and pretty much been doing it ever since. And it's been a changing landscape, man. I actually still do all the disputing for each client I have. Every time they call, they speak with me. So this is a guy that's been in the trenches and see firsthand what's going on, not just reading something off the internet to find out if it's true or not. So I have my own personal history of things I've tried and done, I know work, and then I share that information with the clients as well.
Wait a minute. So you mean you're actually somebody that puts your hands into this to find out the truth of what's really happening? You just don't go to the Google bot and ask for its advice on how to do things?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, today's times, I'm sure a lot of people that are in professionals as well can realize or have dealt with it when they deal with somebody. Well, I was on Google and it told me, and it's like, well, wait a minute, let's.
Yeah, that's I actually had I don't think I've told you this, but I actually had a client of mine recently sent me an ad from a TikTok, and the ad was something like, clean off your credit history in 90 days with this new law, and they sent it to me asking if I'd ever heard of it. And of course, it was the Federal Credit Reporting Act, which has been around since 1972. So yeah, I'd heard of it, but the TikTok apparently was pretty new. So you got to watch out the marketing stuff, man. It's
Oh yeah. Because TikTok, that's another great source of solid information on how to do
it
things.
can be, but you got to be careful. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, speaking of the credit repair, let's get a little bit into that and kind of dig deeper into it. And just so everybody knows, I've got a lot of questions here. My great assistant, Chad, has put together an incredible list of questions because I'm in the world of finance. I help people get financing to buy or refinance homes. And typically that is the first thing that comes up when I'm working with a client is credit. And they have a lot of questions. And Chad was nice enough to put together a list here of some questions that people have asked. Let's get into, can you explain to us a little bit on how what is credit repair and exactly how does it work, Greg?
Credit repair, in essence, just using some laws to your advantage to try to go in and what they call clean up your credit, as far as trying to remove things that maybe aren't yours, or if you can't recall they're yours, fixing errors, late payment history. But it also has to do with rebuilding. Um, One of the big mistakes people make with the credit repair is they try to remove and get items taken off to where they think they're cleaning up their credit, but if they're not focusing on new credit as well, if they don't have any, they end up being like somebody fresh out of high school, no credit at all, which is, and as you know, just as bad as having bad credit. So it's a two-part process. You need to learn to build new while we're trying to clean up some of the bad.
Okay, so you take a little deeper approach. You're not just about, hey, let me help you clean up some of the negative stuff that is showing up on your credit report that is inaccurate and inappropriately placed there. You dig into it and go, okay, it's one thing to get your credit in a better position, but I want to give you the education you need to get yourself in a position so you can have long-term success.
Right. Yeah. To be more specific, anything that's how the law reads, anything that's you feel is inaccurate, obsolete, outdated, or unverifiable.
Okay. And I know we see a lot of that too,
Sure.
especially when we're working on refinances with people. I can't tell you how many times we get stuff from the title company. Hey, there's judgments, there's liens, there's bankruptcies on all these people. And of course, we have to go through on the title side of things with the title companies, at least in Texas where I'm at. Now, just so everybody knows, Mr. West is not in Texas. He's at a secret hidden location in the mountains of Kentucky, but we cannot disclose his location. He does have his contact information on the screen. So if you'd like to reach him, that's his secret bat phone. You may reach him for consulting.
We kid, of course. Of course, if you call now, you're going to get my voicemail, but I'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, speaking of credit, as well on, thank you for getting information on the credit repair and a little bit better idea of how it works. What are some of the common mistakes that you see people making with their credit in today's times?
Really, it's the internet searching, because there's a lot of good information, but there's a lot of bad information based on who you're contacting to get the information from. So when someone calls me, I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to do. Like, for instance, with credit information, you're going to get a different answer from a mortgage guy than you will, say, a bankruptcy attorney or a debt negotiation attorney or a credit repair guy like myself. So one of the biggest mistakes I'd say is just kind of jumping in and not figuring out what you need. Like, there's a big misconception out there that if you go and you start paying off a bunch of your old collections that have been on there for years, and by the way, in some states you may not even owe anymore, which we can get into that later, but a lot of people assume that when you pay those debts off that they take them off your credit report, and that's not always the case. What you end up with is just a collection or a charge off with a zero balance, but it's still hurting you. Whereas you could have put that money to better use somewhere else, maybe building credit, paying down credit cards, things like that. But I'd say that's one of the biggest mistakes.
Okay. Yeah, I've had that a lot too, where I have people, they'll go and they're like, well, I paid that collection off. Why is it still there? I'm like, because they don't have to remove it if they choose not to.
Yeah.
And people going and paying a 6-year-old collection, a lot of times from what I see on my end is, guess what that does? That just reactivated that account and made it fresh.
Yeah, it can potentially change the date of last activity. So you
Yes,
may end up having it on your report longer than it should have stayed.
exactly. And there's another one I would like to get into. Um, Working on the credit side of things, whether it's paying off things or whether it's in the process of disputing, can you kind of give us an idea about how that is going to affect people when they're trying to do things like, let's say, buy a car, or let's say financing to buy a home, like when they're working with me, if they're in the middle of disputing things or in the middle of paying off things, how is that going to play into the factoring of what they're doing?
Okay, that's a good question. I actually get that a lot with my clients. Because I put a disclaimer in my agreement with them that they should not be pulling their credit, but mainly it's because every time you get an inquiry, it does lower the score. But generally, unless you're buying a home, it doesn't affect a whole lot. What happens is a lot of the accounts get turned into actively in dispute. So if you're buying a mortgage, you definitely do not need to be doing credit repair until the mortgage is closed, because it can screw up a closing. Any items that are actively in dispute, or make sure the disputes are done before you start the process. Generally, with
Exactly.
anything else, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I can attest to people when I get a credit report and there's items in dispute. The first thing an underwriter is going to ask for once that file goes into underwriting, hey, I need all of those items on that credit report that are in dispute. I need them out of dispute, and I need to have the credit profile rescored.
Yeah, I've had cases where I've actually had to file a dispute to remove comments of that it's in dispute, because sometimes they don't remove them when it's done. So yeah, that happens frequently.
That's something that I've been noticing over the past couple years, and I know you and I have discussed this when we're working with clients, is we spend time with them. I mean, we've had clients we've spent years working with to get them in the financial position to be able to become, homeowners where they can actually have the joy of being a homeowner and not have to worry about losing their home, but they still have that stuff sitting on their credit report where the stuff still shows in disputes. We went with them, worked on them, got all the inaccurate information removed on the credit report, helped them build a good credit profile. And then you have to go back in and tell the credit reporting agencies, hey, this is no longer under dispute, to get that
Yep,
removed.
for sure.
It's almost like they're working very hard to make sure your credit is not quite as good as it should be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Some people might call it a conspiracy, but really, if you look at it, banks, lenders, do they really have a vested interest to help you get your score as high as possible? Because then they can't justify a lower rate
Uh,
or a higher
it,
rate, which of course they make more money on. So I don't know. You could dive deep into that.
no, I would have to agree with you. I'm going to throw this out there because we would never ever on my show, because I would never ever get into any conspiracies on anything. That would be
Right.
crazy talk. But no, I mean that's true, because at the end of the day, your credit profile has a lot to do with what interest rate I'm going to be able to offer you, because that's another item that's out there that people don't realize. This back when we went through the last mortgage meltdown in 2007 and 2008, the federal government came in and told us mortgage loan officers, originators, hey, you guys can no longer be paid on the interest rate and fees that are charged to a borrower. And I'm going to be honest, it's that actually has helped out, because now me as a lender, I have no vested interest in giving you a higher interest rate. I have even more incentive to give you a lower interest rate. However, with that
Hmm.
said, one of the main contributing factors is your credit profile, and your credit score determines in a large portion of what your interest rate's going to be.
Yep,
And that's why I stress to people, hey, you've got to have the highest credit scores possible, especially in today's times when we're in the wonderful time of elevated
absolutely.
interest rates. Here's another good question. Tell me how somebody with poor credit is gonna a poor credit score is gonna impact somebody on their financial life in general? I mean, kind of dive deep into that if you would, because we know it's more than just the credit itself. There's a reason their credit is got some dings on it.
Right. Well, I tell you, it's slowly getting to a point where it's impacting everything. It used to be just the scores affected like your rates on loans or getting approvals, but now it's diving into it's starting to affect some car insurance rates, your jobs, certain especially if you're in like security, military, some government, where you can potentially not get promoted based on your credit history. So it's starting to dive into everywhere, and then of course, if they get into the social credit scoring thing, I'm sure that'll be added in there as well, as far as how your credit scores relate to all that. So it's impacting everything. Even say if you don't want to buy a house, but you're looking to rent. Even a lot of your landlords, your potential landlords, are pulling credit history, looking for some reason to deny. So it's getting to a point where if you're not getting your credit in good shape, you could become what I would call a third class citizen.
Now, you mentioned the social credit score, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this one, but we know that there is a social credit score out there. It's kind of in the shadows right now, but it seems to be weaving its way deeper and deeper into the credit profiles. Do you see in the future the social credit score and the credit reports as we know them today almost merging together and becoming one type of report?
I do. I really expect at some point, because there's three different agencies and technically four with Innovis, and they're all privately owned. But I could see at some point where they might merge all of them into one sort of under some government umbrella. I could see that, but we'll see how it pans out. Either way, you need to get yourself straightened out just for your own financial well-being.
Well, exactly. And when you're working with people, do you take the time to work with them on their finances, work with them on going, okay, there's a reason you had some hiccups in your past, which let's be honest, how many Americans today have not had something come up in their past that has caused, a credit issue that
Hmm.
happens. It happens. Crying about it doesn't do any good. It's okay. What are we going to do moving this point forward?
Yeah,
Because
go ahead.
I mean, you know as well as I do, how much education in school? Let me ask this of my audience here. How much in school did you spend learning about your finances? How much time did you spend in school learning about how to take care of? Remember the good old days? Now I sound like an old person, but how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah. Well, I dive a lot into it quite a bit. That's one reason I did the financial advisor disclaimer, because this is basic stuff we should know. Um, Almost weekly, I'm speaking to somebody who, when I mention the word budget, they really don't even know. I'm like how much money you have left at the end after you pay your what I call your fixed expenses. They don't know. Uh, and then you have those that are never reconciled a bank statement, so they know what they still have outstanding coming in. So the budgeting is huge, and I do go through that because if you take the time and spend the money and go through and fix your credit up, all it takes is one 30-day late or one collection because you didn't have the money because you spent it and didn't have it budgeted out, and you can go backwards 100 points and you're starting all over again. Because the more recent a derogatory, the more damaging it is. That's why you can have perfect credit for 20 years. You get like this little collection that you forgot about or a 30-day late, and you've lost 100 points. It's not fair, but that's the way the system works.
I have a borrower that I just helped him and his wife be able to buy their first new home. They were so excited about it. They were so happy. It took about 6 months. It's a brand new construction home with a fantastic builder that I work with. They build an incredible, affordable home, which in today's times, that's almost a rarity now versus a normal. Um, and I felt so bad when I had to get an updated credit report. And he had a small, I want to say $50 collection pop up. and take his credit score from the 730s to just below 640. I'm
Yeah.
talking less than $50 collection.
And I'd like to make a, because you were talking about earlier about the common mistakes people make. One of those, I call it the mistake on principle. You have a lot of people that have some great credit, and maybe they get, for lack of a better word, screwed by some company, and they're trying to collect $100 from them, and they just refuse to pay it out of principle. You're probably better off just paying it and trying to fight it later, because once that hits your credit, is that $100 really worth the damage that's being done? Because that happens a lot, especially with uh, returning equipment, gym fees where you break contracts, things like that. Because they're bad for. Actually, I had a guy call me the other day that 4 years ago he returned. I think it was Verizon equipment, and he just got like a $400 bill or collection on there because they said he didn't. Of course, who keeps records that long? So you gotta, instead of fighting it, sometimes you just gotta pay it for the greater good later on, until after the fact.
Oh yeah, it's a shame because I mean I felt so bad for that gentleman, and unfortunately there was nothing he could really do because he reached out to the collection company. I want to say it was for cable equipment from shoot 3 4 years ago, maybe even
Yeah.
5 years ago. I don't remember exactly, but he called them up and they said, "Yeah, you owe this money." He's like, "Okay, I'll pay it. Can you remove it from my credit report?" They told him to pound sand. You know,
Hmm.
cost that man money. Oh, it's just and it's just insanity, and that's why it's so important. I stress this to everybody. You've got to get yourself on a budget, especially in these times. You've got to keep an eye on your credit. And let me ask you this, Greg, is there a place, a way that people can go get an idea of where their credit is right now for those of you listening and watching? Is there a place where people can go to get a copy of their own free credit report so they can have an idea of even where they stand? Because a lot of people don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's several places. The one place that was put that I recommend is annualcreditreport.com. Back years ago when they did the FACT Act, the credit agencies had to come up with a place to where you're entitled to a free credit report once a year. And actually online, I think they're doing a weekly now, first because of COVID, now because of financial times. But annualcreditreport.com. Now I prefer paper copies, and because when you get online, you can get in there and print it off. It's probably gonna be 50 pages long. And they overload with a bunch of information you don't need. But on that same website, you can download and print off and fill out a paper form, mail it in, and then you'll get a genuine paper copy delivered to your home, which is good to keep on record anyway. Or you can call, I think it's 877-322-8228. That's the same number, and you can request them and have them mailed that way as well. But that's the only legitimate free place I would get them from, because you'll get the full reports. I know there's places like Credit Karma and them that offer free reports, but they're dated, and a lot of times, and I'll probably end up getting into this later because there's always a question with Credit Karma. The scores on Credit Karma are not correct, which I can get into later, but also they hide the items that have zero balances. So you may have some collections and things on you're not even aware of because you paid them and you think they're gone, but they're not. So always request the paper copies. That's where I would go.
Okay. And I know there's a ton of sources. I get people all the time. Well, I went to this website. I went to that website, and thank you very much for giving us that information on the annual free credit report. Because let's be honest, if there's somebody offering you something, they're typically trying to sell you something, especially when it comes
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
credit report.
Yep.
And I have this happen a lot in my business. Well, I went to my credit card company and my website here, and they gave me my credit score, and it's an 824. And then I pull their credit report and go, well, we've got a little discrepancy between your credit card free report and what the actual credit report is that we use to make a financial decision on what we're able to lend to you.
Yeah. A lot of that has to do with There's different FICO models, whether you're buying a house or a car, but primarily, like I know for sure, Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, and Credit Wise, which is through Capital One, they give you what's called a Vantage score, and it's a completely different model than FICO. So you're not even going to be in the you can have anywhere from 50 to 100 point difference either way. So they're not very. The only thing they're good for is seeing which direction you may be heading, but they're nowhere near accurate.
It's almost like they're trying to create a turmoil
Confusion.
between the people lending the money and the people borrowing the money going, is that lender
Sure.
screwing us?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It makes it difficult. I always tell this to folks, especially when we're dealing in the home buying process. I'm like, look, when the federal government does things in our industry and tells you they're doing this stuff to help you and make it easier for you, it's usually a lie. It's it's usually winds up being more difficult for everybody involved in the process. And anybody who's
Usually, yes.
yeah, anybody who's been involved, any of my real estate agents that are listening to this that have been involved and have seen the wonderful changing between, we used to have a nice form called the HUD settlement statement that was a very easy statement for both buyers and sellers to read and understand. The federal government didn't like that, and they changed that after the Great Mortgage Meltdown and came out with an incredible document that is so user friendly and easy to understand called a closing disclosure. And it's a complete, how should I put it, joy to work with, sir. I don't want to upset anybody in the federal government, because I know all of my viewers and listeners completely trust and love our federal government.
Oh, sure.
As well as you do, sir.
Absolutely.
But well, let me, what I'll do is I've got one more question for you here, and we're already approaching the top of the hour. I can't believe we've gone through this show so quickly. I definitely would love to have you on again in the future, because I think you've given us a lot of great information, Greg. But let's throw something out there for young adults. Why don't you give us some advice that you can give the young adults with basically new credit history, so they don't have to get to where they're in their late 20s, early 30s, really thinking about settling down and buying that first home and going, oh my God, my credit's a nightmare now because nobody showed me what to do. Nobody taught me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can give you this information. I know 100% fact it works, because I did it with my own 3 daughters. I've got daughters that are 28, 25, and 22. All of them have over 700 credit scores. And because I just taught them what to do from the get-go. First thing is, do not let anything go to collection. A lot of young people, they get easy credit in the beginning, especially if you're in college. They give out the credit cards like crazy to college students, mainly because I think they think the parents will bail them out. But a lot of them get in trouble. They don't hit the 30% interest rates. They don't pay it, and collection charge off, and they don't worry about it because they don't need their credit at the time. So here's exactly what I did with all 3 of my girls. I had all of them first off sign up as an authorized. I had them as an authorized user on one of my longest standing credit cards that had very little balance on it. Now, the reason why you want to use one that's longer, because the longer history helps. You want one with a smaller balance, so the utilization rates are low, because utilization on your credit card is 30% of your FICO score. So as soon as I add them to that, I waited a month or 2, and then they had a score. And then I had them apply for their own small credit cards. I do like the Capital Platinum Rebuild card. Only reason I like it is because there's no annual fee to carry it. You don't want to pay a fee, just a privilege of carrying a card. And this one will usually give you anywhere from $300 to $3,000 based on your score. And of course, I tell them to use it, pay it off each month, build some history there. And once they're 6 to 10 months into it, then they can get a better card. Discover's a great one. Capital One, because once you get up in the high 6s, you can get some of the better quality cards and then get into the like cashback rewards, things like that. And then this is not as important, but you can do it. Installment loans are part of your credit history. So having a good mix, at least one of those, whether they're getting a vehicle, because by then, if they have the score, they should be able to buy their own vehicle without a cosigner. But you want to make sure it's a cheaper one, so the payment's not too high, they can't afford it. And then after that, they're kind of off to the races. But that's exactly what I do with my girls, and it's worked well.
Great. Well, I appreciate it.
Let me add this. If you don't have the ability to do that with an authorized user, maybe a loved one, a grandparent, a friend, worst case scenario, they can take a couple $100 and get a secured credit card as well and go that route.
Okay. The secured credit card where, you put $200 down and then you have a $200 limit on that credit card.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, Greg, that is some great advice. Well, I really appreciate it, Greg, and definitely would love to. Got my assistant, Chad, producer, yelling at me, going, "Hey, we're at the top of the hour here now."
And love to come back. Have me on.
Yeah, would definitely love to have you back on. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today on Real Talk with Real Estate Pros. Got some great shows coming up. If you guys need anything or you need any questions on credit, Greg's information is right on the screen here. If you need anything from me, you have any questions on financing, please shoot me a text. My text is right here on the screen. Would definitely love to help you guys out. Have a great day, and glad to have you on the show.